And we're live.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Once again, we're here welcoming you to Amateur Astronomers Incorporated, also known as AAI, for our weekly Fridays at Home presentations. And as you probably know by now, AAI makes its home at William Miller Sperry Observatory on the campus of Union County College in Cranford, New Jersey. And since the observatory is closed at this time, we continue to hold our weekly presentations online. So this evening, our presenter is AAI member Al Witzgall. Al is a very long time member of AAI. He heads up the training on the two telescopes at Sperry Observatory. He's given many presentations at AAI over the years. The title of his presentation is Fake News of the Solar System. So with that, Al, please begin.
Okay, thank you, Mary and George. Good evening, everyone. This has become something of an annual event for the most part with me coming up with strange and unusual things around Halloween. So since fake news seems to be all over the place, we're going to have some fake news of the solar system. Okay. Mysteries in our neighborhood. In no other science has outlandish claims been made over the course of history than in astronomy. Here we discuss a number of those claims, hoaxes, and just crazy stories dealing with the sky and its denizens. So I'm going to start with one of my personal heroes, William Herschel. Everyone knows that he had discovered the planet Uranus with a telescope he had built himself. He also discovered many thousands of star clusters, nebulae, and galaxies with his homemade large telescopes. The 40-foot, as he called it, or 48-inch telescope is up on the right. All these were of quality never before seen. I'll give you a little optician's inside story real fast. He used to test them on stars. He didn't just polish them so they kind of look even, put them in a telescope and made a lot of money. He made sure he had quality to work with, which is why his instruments work so well. But Herschel himself discovered in 1787, he was observing red glows, 5 of them, around the rim of the crater Alphonsus. In 1958, N.A. Kozyrev observed a similar appearance over several months. Now, he had the benefit of technology, over 100 and some odd years of working with spectroscopes. He was able to get a spectrogram of one of those glows, and it showed hot carbon in the form of a gas. And then finally, Apollo 16 on the right here took this photo, apparently confirming some evidence of volcanism. And you can see some of the pyroclastics through here, these dark areas. Someday, a geologist astronaut's going to go there and confirm or deny whether he did see it. I have a funny hunch it's going to show that he did indeed. Okay, now there were outlandish stuff that went back and forth back in Herschel's day. He and many others believed that all stars and planets were inhabited, even the sun, and accepted by learned people back then. Now, this is a very far cry from what happened to Giordano Bruno when he said the same thing about 200 years earlier for his transgressions and such. As you're probably aware, he was burned alive at the stake. Herschel and others believed that the sun had these big luminescent clouds which gave heat and light to the rest of the solar system. And the sunspots were actually holes looking down to the slightly darker, or much darker, I should say, really, area here, and that's where you had your inhabitants. Okay, and believe it or not, it actually made it into the comics. These are 2 pages I was able to find on the web. This is from the Sun War, Captain Marvel Jr. in August 1941. As I usually say with something like this, these hands actually held that copy way back, oh gosh, it's got to be about 1959. My Uncle Emil was into comics almost as much as I have been. And both of us have something in common. We learned how to read. But in his case, he had Captain Marvel Jr. I guess for him, when he was 13, this was pretty cool because Junior here was supposed to be around 13 years old. And essentially, it follows the Earth being superheated, and our hero goes out to the sun. And there's, if you can read the cover of the section over here, it's some of the worst comic book science I've ever seen in my life. but it got across the point. And and remember, this is August of 1941, so the winds of war are all over the planet. And here you had a war, you guessed it, right on the sun. Okay, we'll go with that. Now, could this be making global warming now? Okay, back to reality. The observatory here. Now, this is William's son, John Herschel, who, by the way, gave us photography and many of the terms we used to use with photography: snapshot, fixer, developer, such like that. He was actually by trade a chemist, but he kept up with the family tradition of observing, and he took his father's favorite instrument to South Africa, where he extended his father's general catalog to the Southern Hemisphere. In the background here in this woodcut, this is Feldhausen, or Fieldhouse, and this is the 20 feet instrument. And of course, John over here, I think he was in his 30s when that was painted. Okay. Now, the reason I brought him in here is because of this. The New York Sun and the Moon Hoax. On August 25th of 1835, a weekly newspaper, the New York Sun, was getting into trouble. They were starting to get into finance problems, and finally, they decided that they would report a total of 6 reports that purportedly came from Sir John, who was viewing the moon with his 18.8-inch, 20-feet reflector telescope. And you can see quite a bit of life going on there. There's a nice waterfall in the background here, and a river runs through it. And look at this, in the lower gravity, supposedly, they had winged people. Okay, and he found all sorts of stuff there, according to Richard Adams Locke, who is the editor of this weekly paper. He basically had John Herschel discovering all sorts of things in idyllic settings. I mean, giraffes and unicorns, and again, bat-winged people on the lunar surface. That must be one heck of a powerful eyepiece he used. Okay, now the public was fascinated, and this saved the paper. And interestingly enough, they were skeptical, as you might think. John himself first was amused by it, and then he got very annoyed because more and more people were asking, so what did you see? Oh my gosh, what's new? Well, the Sun never really claimed that it was real or not, but the paper survived until 1950. So something must have happened and worked. Okay, now a little bit of reality here. This photograph was taken on November 15th of 1953 by Dr. Leon Stewart. He had with a homemade telescope of his own creation. I think it was an 8-inch. And he shows a pinpoint impact here. Let's get it. There we are, right there. The flare, according to his observations, lasted from 8 to 10 seconds. So maybe there was an impact here. Now, this has been speculated back and forth for quite a bit. And then on January 20th to the 21st, and it's interfering. I got to move myself over here. Well, anyway, about 2 years ago, about a year and a half rather ago, there was a total lunar eclipse, and naturally it was very windy and very cold, and yours truly was fiddling with his telescope at about 11:35 to try to move it to an area in front of the house where there wasn't quite as much wind. And that's how I missed seeing this from beautiful photographs somebody had taken. About 11:35 p.m., and the impact site against a modern photograph is right about here. So it'll be interesting if we get a space probe going in orbit of mapping in greater detail. This only lasted about a second or two. So maybe it was a small meteoroid, maybe about the size maybe of an old VW Beetle. Still. And I ask everyone that is within the sound of my voice, you have your telescope, the moon is very easy to observe. You know, you've got almost a full moon to be able to see it. These are some areas on the moon you should be watching just in case there is what we call transient lunar phenomena. And I have yet to see anything that I couldn't explain away, although I gotta admit, when I went over to Aristarchus crater, sometimes the appearance just looks a little funny to me, but I usually disregard it myself because sometimes it's just seeing that distorts it a bit, but you never know, maybe something will happen. Or as I say, keep watching the skies. Okay, the mysterious Mars. I like to throw this in because this shows Syrtis Major, one of the larger features here. It turns out this, by the way, everyone, this is a shield volcano, like Olympus Mons, but somewhat flatter, if you will. Maybe more, at the time, maybe it was more of a more fluid lava. And then a few weeks later, we had this big storm. And look at this, the whole planet almost completely obscured. Just when it gets close enough, of course, to see really good detail. Okay. But in 1951, Japanese observers, this is a Sunio Taheki's observation of a flare on the surface of Mars, what appeared to be the surface of Mars. And it shows as it fades out and about. The current theory then and now is that there are probably high clouds that just happen to hit the right amount of reflectivity. But this was really sensational back in 51. And then people, again, they speculate, did he really see it? You know, was it just an illusion? And then in 2001, several observers in the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers took the video and were able to capture the brightenings, which faded out, I believe, after about an hour or two. And this is back in 2001, so something's going on up there. Okay, and if only. With more probes and rovers going to Mars, it's quite natural to see what you want to see in the photos sent back to Earth. And you got to remember, it is a strange new world, such as this. In 1976, the Viking orbiter, and it was first the face on Mars. And then 1998, a much higher resolution, Mars Global Surveyor. Now, this is not an artificial construct. Originally, many people in the UFO community said, well, they must have put this monument up expecting eventually these poor little Earthmen will get up here and see it, and maybe they'll come up without first contact or something. Well, not quite. This is an island in the stream. This was all flooded out at one time. And if you got a good imagination, there are the eyes, there's the nose, and part of a mouth, maybe smoking over here. I don't know why the Martians would smoke. But this, from a geological point of view, this would be a terrific place to observe and to sit down and actually see the geology of the time. Okay, something funny over here. Okay, you got all Martian rocks over here and some plate-like sandstones and such, and then you got this thing over here. And people jumped all over this. Hey, look, there's life on Mars. Oh my God. A Martian iguana. Nah, just some piled rocks, shadow, and human imagination. That's cool. I wish it were. It would have been fun if they took another picture of the same area and it had moved or disappeared. That would have been cool. But not to be. It's still sitting there. And then, of course, Mars gorilla in your dreams. I love this picture. This is supposed to be a like a Bigfoot-esque creature out there, but apparently not really. Again, rocks and the human imagination come together. Oh, it does look pretty cool. Okay, and some myths just don't want to go away, and such as the next one. So a book came out in 1950, a Russian scholar, Immanuel Velikovsky, produced this, Worlds in Collision, that postulated many events in the Bible actually occurred, but due to the influence, are you ready? Of the planet Venus. Oh my God. This thing was a bestseller. Okay, this is a doctor of philosophy, Velikovsky, and this supposedly is what happened when Jupiter spat out Venus, which went on a rousing and carousing run around the solar system. By this hypothesis, the sun and the moon appeared to stand still due to the effects of the flyby of Earth by Venus. And then that runs past Mars and makes another flyby of Earth that creates the Great Flood. Wow. And then Venus settles into the most stable and circular orbit of all the planets. Okay. Okay. So this is the actual quote from Joshua. Joshua spoke to the Lord on the day the Lord delivered the Amorites before the children of Israel, etc. And I love the sun stands still and new moon in the valley. And it's wonderful. I mean, originally, when I heard about this, I thought that, well, if anybody has ever been in any kind of really super tight combat, it would appear as though the day is lasting for more than 24 hours. Well, not quite here. See, if these words are correct, if everything is a direct observation here, then we had a major astronomical event taking place. If you go back to the original Hebrew, it says that the sun, let me just make sure here, yep, an alternative meaning could be that the sun and the moon just were not doing what they're supposed to do normally, shining, lining up to create an annular solar eclipse on October 30th of 1207 BCE, and probably the first one that has been recorded in history. And also dated a number of other events, because from that point you move backward, back toward the present, and the reign of several kings were confirmed. And an annular eclipse, I don't know how many of my audience have seen that, but basically it's a ring eclipse. You need a filter all through it. But if you get right on the center line, then you get a beautiful ring of fire. Now, back in 1994, there was a annular eclipse that went right over Stellafane, but it wasn't quite centered. So my pictures all showed a little bit offset, but not by much. And it's really an impressive thing. One thing, though, there will be one in October of 2023, which will go through the Southwest United States. And I mention this because it's a good way to do a practice run for April of 2024, when a total eclipse is going to run through, actually across North America, starting in Mexico, going through Texas, extending up into Canada, and off the coast, Newfoundland. At greatest eclipse, it'll be 4 minutes, 28 seconds. And by the time it leaves the North American continent, it's only going to be down to 3 and 20. And that's incredible. It's a wonderful alignment of the sun, the moon, and the Earth's rotation. Just a little advertisement. Okay. And maybe we're not alone in the universe after all. A little shiver up the back now. Betty and Barney Hill, I guarantee you, some of you out there probably said, I wonder if he's going to talk about this. Yep. September 19th to the 20th, 1961, reportedly, Betty and Barney Hill were taken aboard a spacecraft, given medical examinations, I wonder if it was Blue Cross or Blue Shield, and then released. Recurring nightmares in both of them led to hypnotherapy, where the story of the event, quote unquote, came out. During her time on the ship, though, Betty was shown a map with various star systems that the aliens said that they frequented. And she was asked, where are you on the map? And she replied, well, I really don't know, but there must be people here on Earth who could probably figure it out. Where are you on the map? She asked him. And the alien said, well, since you don't know where the sun is, then what would be the meaning of showing where we are? Well, okay. Ohio school teacher Marjorie Fish used the 1969 Gliese catalog of nearby stars to create a 3D map, physically put together a map with the proper spacings and such. When she picked up this, I think it was about 350 or so stars, moved it around, she came up with this pattern. Apparently, the aliens came from Zeta 1, Zeta 2 reticuli, and we are out here in the outmarches for eventual contact. I mean, if this was in 1971, I would swear they watched too many episodes of classic Star Trek. But there are a number of stars, which possibly some of them were solar type. They could maybe have planets on them. So, interesting. Now, it turns out that years later, in the 1990s, the super mapping satellite Hipparcos created accurate coordinates to build a far more accurate catalog than the Gliese. Turns out that many of the stars mentioned in Fish's model were much farther away, avoiding the accuracy of the map. She has herself rejected her hypothesis in public statements. It's a shame. It would have been nice if it had confirmed it, but, you know, reality is what we deal with in astronomy, usually. Okay, and then I wanted to get this in here, too. This was actually just tonight. I was able to get everything together. This is the WOW signal, as it was called. It's basically a strong radio sighting received on August 15th, 1977 in Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope. It's 100 meters in length and 33 meters in width. And this was used to support the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The signal appeared to come from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. And as they say, Jerry Ehrman discovered the signal a few days later while just reviewing what had been picked up. And he circled that area, the code, and wrote WOW, which is where it got its name. Oh, well, you know, Larry Niven's science fiction had a navigator looking down from his ship on Toth Ceti, and he sees Mount Look at That, named by the navigator. Look at that. Well, it turns out it was a 72-second window that they were able to observe it, and it has not been detected, at least not this way, since. And by the way, this radio telescope, unfortunately, no longer exists. It's a shame. It was taken down, I think, about 10 years after the observation, and now it's a golf course from the stars to the Gulf. Oh, well. Okay, now it looks, though, that this gentleman over here may have cracked the case. This is Antonio Paris, who's an adjunct professor of astronomy and in St. Petersburg College in Florida. And his team recently took an opportunity to survey the region of the sky, again in Sagittarius, but with a comet that was there around the same time that wow signal was picked up. And apparently the radio noise from that and a few others nearby explains what happened. It matched the signal almost perfectly, but at least they kept looking. So it's a relatively quick night tonight, folks. After all, you know, the Gillies and Ghosties are going to be out tomorrow night. In conclusion, imagination will often carry us to worlds that never were, but without it, we go nowhere. Carl Sagan is fantastic with this. And just one more, and you might have expected this too. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And it's a shame that Dr. Sagan passed away some years ago. I think he might have gotten a kick out of all the things from his passing. I think that was in 1996. He and I were born on the same day, but 20 years apart. Okay. And I have to thank my wife, Bonnie, who kept everything squared together. I have to thank Mary Duca, our VP and DNP chair. Michelle Toffel is educator and colleague. Mark Littman, author of Totality, which if you don't have that book and you want to look at eclipses, I strongly recommend it. It's a great introduction. And a very patient NASA and ESA space agencies. And of course, the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. And I believe that's it. And that's it. And I thank you for your attention. And Mary, back over to you.
Okay, Al, thanks very much. Does anybody have any questions for Al? Please make sure you post your questions in the Q&A pane at the bottom of your screen. Right now, we don't have any questions, but I don't know if you want to expand on anything, Al, that you've just talked about. You're free to do so, or welcome to do so.
The eerie silence, not just in the universe, but in questions. That's okay.
Somebody did post something in the chat from Jim Chenard. Al, do you recall a night at Sperry in the late 1970s when we saw Phobos and Deimos?
It's vaguely familiar. I'd really have to go looking back in very old notes to see if we did. I think we saw Phobos. I don't remember Deimos.
Okay. Donna Pope says, thanks, Al. Finn and I enjoyed the presentation. Fun stuff.
You're quite welcome.
Jim Chenard goes back to saying there were two small points next to Mars for the two moons. Okay.
Well, I have no doubt at least one. I don't remember the second one myself. Then again, you know, it's been a couple of years. So.
Okay. Let's see. Any other questions, anybody? If not, I want to thank everyone. Thank you, Al, for your presentation. They're always fun and enjoyable, but also interesting and informational, too. So I want to remind everybody to join us every Friday night at 8 p.m. online. Our presentation next week will be our What's Up at Down to Earth Sky Guide, which is our monthly presentation of what you can see up in the night sky for that month. So Kathy Vaccari will be giving that presentation, and she'll be talking about what you can see up in the night sky for the month of November. And we'll be here every Friday night. So thank you all.
Okay, I'm going to stop the live stream now.